You're very easygoing, Keith, and welcome everybody else as well to the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman, and so excited to have you with us here, end of 2012, and we have some amazing pioneers to talk to. We're well in the run-up to Gamification Summit, which is coming up in April 16th through the 18th of 2013. It's gsummit.com. And as part of that, we're featuring some of the greatest pioneers in gamification, some of the biggest thinkers in the run up to the show. And I'm super pleased to have Keith Smith, the founder of BigDoor, with us today. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Hi, Gabe. Good to see you.
Awesome sauce. So Keith, let me ask you this. And you were one of the first people to really see the opportunities in gamification and start BigDoor there in Seattle some number of years ago. What do you think has been kind of the biggest change that's happened in the industry from your perspective since then?
Well, I think since the very beginning, we always viewed gamification as being a mechanism for driving real underlying performance for businesses and real KPIs and real metrics, with the primary one really being all about loyalty. And I guess depending on folks' definitions of things, engagement and loyalty really go very close together. So I think what's been interesting is that while gamification has had an awful lot of hype, and there's been a lot of excitement about the very concept, it feels to me like there is starting to be a real connection between gamification and real metrics that drive real business and real revenue. And we're certainly starting to see that. We're starting to see as we get clients who are reaching out to us, they have a better understanding of the kind of impact that gamification can have on loyalty, and that's a very exciting trend for us. And we feel like it's 2013 hopefully is going to be much less about hype and much more about, for gamification specifically, much more about real results.
So I think that's really interesting, right? I mean, how do you feel? Because you must have believed that there were real results from the very beginning. So what do you, when you talk about results, when you think about results as they relate to loyalty, what does that actually look like to you? Like, what are results that people are excited about?
Yeah, it's a great point. And so one of the things that we've done from the very beginning is we felt like we needed to be able to, first of all, understand for ourselves if we were actually driving real results, and second, be able to prove to our clients that we were driving real results. So we have baked in from the very beginning, the core of our platform, this concept of control cohorts. So the ability to be able to select a percentage, a randomly selected percentage of the audience for a particular site or for a particular gamification implementation, to not see any of the loyalty or gamification at all, and be able to track what the performance and what the effectiveness is of that group, and compare them to the users who are actually seeing the rewards program and seeing the gamification elements. And so that's a really critical element. We focused on three areas primarily, and there's a lot of metrics that come about from these three areas, but the three primary areas are, first of all about registration rates. So you have to get to know your customer before you can actually develop a relationship with them. Give them a reason, an excuse to actually sign up, to register, for them to tell you who they are. Secondly is all about engagement, and then third about loyalty. So how often are users actually coming back? And so those are kind of the three big KPI categories. But the key point there is that we always compare the results and the effectiveness of the gamification elements and what the users who see those gamification elements to that underlying control cohort that doesn't see any of it at all.
Okay, so great. I actually think that's a super innovative thing and very, very important for establishing metrics, way better than the, just what happened before and what's happening after kind of control. But so we talk about a lot about loyalty. I've been talking about it since the beginning. You're talking about it now. And of course, I'm sure many of you have questions. Of course, for Keith, if you do, be sure to click on the question or chat button. I can never tell which way it is for everyone. Click on the chat button and enter your question in there, and we'll bring you on camera if you've got video or just text. So you keep talking about loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. So what kind of effect have you seen from the Big Door platform, from the things that you've seen done on loyalty? Like, is there something tangible we can say about how well we're able to drive loyalty, and what even is loyalty?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we see typically, and this is kind of across all of our implementations, across literally tens of millions of users, and a lot of different implementations that we have. And by the way, that's been a really critical point, because we do focus on consumer-facing gamification and loyalty implementations. And as a result, we have been able to test some of our theories and test some of our features, et cetera, across many users, tens of millions of users, and that has allowed us to be able to improve significantly. So the specifically when it comes to loyalty and the metric and how we measure loyalty, it's pretty simple. It's DAU divided by MAU. So it's in other words, it's saying this is my monthly audience. This is how many people show up at my site or for my application in a given month. Now, how many of those are actually showing up on a daily basis and being able to measure the lift? And so another way to think about it is just on average, how many days do your users come to your site and how often do they interact with you and measuring that, and then of course being able to increase the amount of which that happens is a very important metric for most of our customers.
Now, and that's a very like kind of web-oriented view, I guess, of what the metric is that we need to track. Because you're saying it's like, kind of this recency metric or frequency metric out of every 30 days. Is that the same metric that you'd use if you were doing something to track in the real world or in mobile?
It really is, and so and I tend to my language always does kind of it is very web centric because that is the bulk of our clients. But we are starting to work with clients that are even in retail and in much more traditional lines of business. And really, the same thing applies. It's if I'm a retail store, I want folks to walk through my door more often. And so how many times per month are they walking through my door? If I'm a mobile application, I want my customers to actually be interacting with my mobile app on a more regular basis. Now, that is the loyalty metric, and that is the third in kind of the line of the metrics that we track. And so if you start with registration rates and how many people, of the people who are interacting with your application or with your website, how many are actually registering and telling you who they are, that's a really critical percentage to drive up. And then, of course, the engagement rate is also really critical. So if you're a retail operation, we would call engagement. It's a variety of things. It's a variety of the interactions that you're having with the touch point or various touch points you're having with that brand, but it also includes the concept of me actually interacting and buying and purchasing from that brand. And if you're a publisher, it's the amount of times that I'm interacting. Maybe I'm watching videos, maybe I'm inviting my friends, all of these really critical actions that our partners care about. We encompass all of that in engagement, and then loyalty being the third piece, which is how many times am I actually coming back, or how many times are customers coming back and interacting with the brand.
So what's I mean, so now we're talking a little bit about revenue. You brought revenue into the metrics picture and said sales or transactions or whatever the case may be. Do you feel like there's any risk with attaching gamification, especially at the beginning of a project, directly to revenue metrics, or do you feel like that's something that we have to be able to do?
I think we have to. And so when we think about registration rates, when we think about engagement rates, when we think about loyalty rates, all of those are lead indicators to revenue. And they should be ultimately lead indicators to profit as well. So that is the underlying piece of all of the KPIs and all the metrics that we measure for our clients. It really is about ultimately resulting in increased revenue.
So we're here, by the way, on the Gamification Revolution. If you're just joining us, I'm Gabe Zickerman, and we're talking with Keith Smith, the founder of BigDoor, one of the kind of pioneering platforms in the gamification space. So Keith, take us just back a little bit to just the founding of the company again. What was it that caught your attention about gamification as a space that you thought, like, as a successful previous entrepreneur, with a great track record under your belt, what made you say, I want to pursue the gamification space, put my shoulder into it, start a company in it? What was the impetus behind that?
So the impetus really came from my last company. I ran a company that was in online advertising, and we had a large audience that we were aggregating, and we're constantly battling with churn. And so it's not only the issue of getting users to come and register, it's not only the issue of getting them to engage, but then just getting them to be loyal and to continue to have them to be consistently interacting with us. And that was a constant challenge. It was a challenge that a lot of our peers were facing. And so the idea of creating kind of a fun loyalty program, rewards program that used and borrowed concepts from the social gaming world was something that we wanted to do. We planned for it, we strategized for it, we put it on our list of things to do every year, and it seemed like for about 3 years we were never able to get to that item because there were always other pressing things to do. So when I left that company, the first thought I had was, that was the biggest challenge, the biggest need, the thing that we always wanted to create. We realized that we didn't know necessarily how to do it. We didn't know how effective it was going to be. But we also thought that there were a lot of other companies that were probably in a similar place where if there was a platform that was easy to implement, that could really fit to and be authentic to their brand and to the experience that they want to create with their audiences, that they would likely want to be able to use a platform rather than trying to build it from scratch. And so that was the concept, and that was really the beginning. And it was before the word gamification existed, so we didn't think of it as gamification at the time. We didn't call it gamification, but then we embraced the term when it came when it started to just kind of enter into the consciousness about 6 months later.
So we got some questions lining up, but you mentioned a word that I want to
Fidel
just
there.
talk
Look at
about.
that. I just got
I
to
want to,
point out
yeah.
is that you pronounce that Fidel. I just think it's a fantastic comment and a really insightful comment that he just made.
Yes, Fidel, it is true. Keith is very handsome, and you would be surprised at how often he gets carded everywhere that he goes. And that's why I like going out with him whenever we're in the same place. So here's a question for you. Speaking of authenticity and handsomeness. So at the last gamification summit, one of your kind of marquee clients, and you've been developing a sort of reputation as a company that has got kind of big entertainment clients as part of your mix, and I want to talk about that too. But one of your marquee clients, a guy named Chameleonaire, which many people recognize as a Grammy award-winning artist, came and gave this like amazing talk on the stage at G Summit. I encourage everyone to check it out if they have a chance to see it. And his talk was really about the success of gamification by using authenticity. And the thing that I think about that he said all the time, or the thing I think about all the time that he said was, if you give people what they want, if you give the customer what they want, that's a good thing. And they should give you something back for that.
Right.
How, it's such a simple, it's an incredibly simple idea. Is it hard for companies to grasp that they need to give their consumers something of value and expect something in return, and that that should be an authentic give and take? Is that difficult to convince people of?
I think for certain industries, it is something that is that maybe some industries just aren't as far along in their thinking about that as others. But you take the airline industry as a great example, and they figured out some core elements about thanking their customers, rewarding their customers, and expecting something in return. And so if you are a business traveler and you have your favorite airline where you happen to get your miles, the implicit agreement is that you will book your travel. If all other things, for the most part, are equal, you'll book your travel through your favorite preferred airline, and they'll give you points back. And then when you want to take your family to Hawaii, then you can take your family to Hawaii if you travel enough with that airline. So there's this in certain industries, I think they understand that, but it's more than just a payoff. I think it's and Chameleonaire is an absolutely brilliant entrepreneur. So we can't take any credit for any of the kind of the wow factor of what he presented when he was at the Gamification Summit, because it really was a great and impressive speech. But the authenticity piece is really critical. And so if you're just trying to pay off your users, if you're just trying to just give them something to try to buy them, in our experience anyway, that is not all that effective. But if it's an authentic part of the experience that the brand is creating between themselves and their customers, then that kind of thank you, that kind of reward can have a big impact. But gamification, I don't think, can create the authenticity. There has to be an authentic brand and an authentic experience that already exists. Gamification can reinforce that. It sits over the top of it. It can make sure that it doesn't damage it. It can help to foster it. And it does need to be authentic in order for it to be effective. But there really does need to be an authentic layer underneath. And that's certainly what Chameleonaire has with his fans already. And so gamification and the rewards program that we power for Chameleonaire is just an enhancement of that existing authenticity.
So, okay, so great. And I think we've got some questions lining up here from folks about ROI and about some of the metrics. And so, Joseph, thank you for the question, Joseph. The question is really about does it how do we track the overall benefits? So how do we so and my question for you is really, so we talk about returning users, and we talk about the conversion to revenue, but is that actually all there is? Is there something else here that we need to be thinking about? Like what about like the emotional connection between people? That was one of the things I was struck by, in Chameleonaire's discussion, was that he was doing something that people were really emotionally attached to. And it's easy to dismiss that and say, oh, well, he's a musician, he's a famous musician, so obviously people are emotional about it. But I think people can be emotional about all kinds of stuff. How do we ensure, how do you ensure, how do we ensure that we're designing for that like emotional connection, that we create that kind of same energy that you will be able to do there?
Yeah, the way we think about it, and the way we talk about it a lot, is this idea that a brand, and when I say brand, I mean, in Chameleonaire in this case is very much a brand. The equity that they have built up with their audience, with their fans, with their customers, gamification can be a wonderful mechanism for enhancing that brand equity. And what I mean by that is this idea of basically taking the brand equity as a brand and kind of distributing it out to your customers, to your audience. And what that does is that if you do it properly, it doesn't spend the brand equity. It actually enhances and increases the brand equity, which is a really important thing. And just hanging on to that brand equity and not doing anything with it is frankly going to diminish it. And so Chameleonaire has a ton of insight about this. And so as an example, some of the things that he will do is he will create rewards that users can get through this gamified rewards program on his site, where you can participate in a Google chat. And so this is a great reward because now you get to sit with 7 other fans and you get to interact with Chameleonaire for a half an hour. And so this is certainly building up brand equity with those 8 folks that are sitting there interacting with Chameleonaire, who have been rewarded this reward through his rewards program. But then also he displays this and puts it out on his website so all the rest of his fans can see it. His fans then see it, and then they of course recognize that Chameleonaire is very much in touch with his audience, and so that of course builds brand equity with them as well, and appreciation for him being in touch with his audience. And while Chameleonaire is certainly an example as it relates to music, and there's certainly a lot of passion around music, the same concepts can absolutely apply to other brands and completely commercial brands as well.
Well, okay, so I get that the same concepts could, but like just let's drill down for 1 second. So do you think that or have you been experiencing that that brands who are not like entertainment brands, like a Chameleonaire or some of the other ones that you work with, can they do things like a Google chat with the CEO of the company? Like, is that a I've talked about it before, but do you think it's a viable reward that people would be into?
It depends. It really does depend on the brand and the experience. But in our experience, for the most part, there is, some of this has to do with the fact that we work with a lot of big entertainment brands, and we also work with some very big retail brands that are also there is oftentimes a kind of a cult following of these brands that this simple things like a reward program that has in it real tangible rewards, but also things like maybe a Twitter follow from the main Twitter account for that brand. That can be a very impactful thing for the right types of users. And so not every user is going to be interested in that, but the users who are interested in that are typically the ones who probably have a big Twitter following. They're probably going to be big social media advocates for the brand. And so those can be kind of self-selecting rewards that the right people, the right influencers will seek out those types of rewards. And again, that builds brand equity because those are the types of folks then that are broadcasting the right kind of message for the brand.
Um, well, that's really interesting, actually. We have more questions to get to, but I have one more question for you on that subject. So, how much energy do you put into when you're thinking about designing a gamification system or gamified loyalty system? How much energy goes into specifically designing for the influencer?
For the influencer,
Yeah.
there's a fair amount. We look and we have to look beyond just the influencer and at the rest of the audience and the rest of the customers that a brand interacts with. But certainly influencers are critical. Making sure that those folks that are sharing, that are actually getting the message for the brand out is very, very critical. So one of the things that's built into our platform that we do that I'm very proud of is that not only do we reward users when they do sharing. And so typically from a website or from a mobile app, if they're just taking the action of sharing, then they'll be rewarded for that. But then we also then monitor and track anybody who then clicks on those links that they've shared. And so we can see how effective and how influential these folks who are sharing really are. And then if anybody registers and comes to the site and registers off of those links that have been shared, then we reward the user also. And so if you had clicked on something that I, as a user, had shared on my Facebook wall, Gabe, you would come to this brand's site, and it would say, welcome. By the way, you'd see a picture of my face, and it would say Keith is already a member of this rewards program. If you sign up and register, you'll get a reward, and Keith will also get an extra bonus reward as well. And so it creates this very nice kind of positive feedback cycle that really is very much geared around the influencer.
So, I mean, it kind of dovetails into Uber's question, which we've covered. You've already covered, metrics a couple of different ways, but just sort of bringing you back to this kind of question about you very specifically now, we're talking about social sharing. And thanks for the question, Uber. And if you want to ask these questions, be sure to click on the box, marked chat or the submit a question button down below, and we'll bring you on screen. But one of the things that Uber is asking, which I'm kind of interested in as well, is like, so let's say we are tracking this kind of social influence and social behavior. Isn't there a risk of rewarding some of that, and like you end up with a lot of chaff and a lot of spam, and kind of don't we just end up in sort of refer a friend purgatory, like most other refer a friend programs are, where you filling out a form, sending it off to 5 people so you can get an extra entry into the program? Like how are we doing this better? How are we making this actually work?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that we have to be cautious about, and that we've learned a lot about over the course of the last year and a half, especially just in terms of if we reward too much just for the act of sharing and to put too much emphasis there, and we don't limit the amount of times that we will reward a user for, then yes, that turns into an opportunity to be able to create and get additional points simply by just share and share and share, and that's not what we want to do. We want to have authentic, good, real sharing that is taking place. So making sure that we frequency cap the amount of times that we will reward a user for in a given day or week for the act of sharing. And then also tracking, though, that next level of how many people are actually clicking on this link. So if I'm out there sharing and sharing constantly and nobody's paying any attention to anything, then that's of course a red flag for us, because nobody's clicking on those shared links. And if people are clicking on those shared links but nobody's actually signing up and registering, that's also an indication for us as well. So it's all part of what we monitor and look at, both in order to detect fraud and also to make sure that we balance the economy and balance the rewards appropriately, so that we are incentivizing the right kind of long-term beneficial behavior, not just short-term behavior.
So when you say frequency cap, and I think that all makes a ton of sense. Now, when you say frequency cap, do you think is there like an ideal like start point number? Because this is a frequent question that I get asked, and I don't know that I know what the like right start point is for frequency cap.
Yeah, so frequency capping. I come from the online advertising world, and so we always think in terms of and talk in terms of frequency capping, because as a brand you don't want to show the same message to the same user too many times. Typically, you want to frequency cap that, and so that maybe you can reinforce that message progressively over the course of a month. But you don't want to inundate them just in one day or in 1 hour with too many of the same messages. And so that same concept applies. What we use just is kind of an out-of-the-box number that we at least start with, and then we typically will tailor this for the specific context and the specific experience, is that we'll reward a user up to 3 times for 3 acts of sharing within a 24-hour period of time. And then we kind of reset the clock again, and you can be rewarded again. But again, it does really depend on the context and on the specific implementation and the specific brand.
So here's another question. So if you see somebody who's like a pretty aggressive sharer, so let's say we frequency capped at three shares in a 24-hour period. So you watch somebody do that day in and day out. Every day the clock strikes over to 12. I'm hypothetical here. Clock strikes over to 12,
Yep.
the person does 3 shares. Next day, clock strikes 12, does 3 shares. At some point, do we need to do something about that user?
So no, I don't think so, and here's why. There's a couple things that are going on. First of all, we encourage our partners and our clients to only reward users when they are sharing from their site or from their application. So not just completely off on in social media, but starting the conversation from the company's site or from the brand's site itself, and that has a very positive impact, because it's of course with social media, one of the fears is that every bit of interaction that customers have with a brand will happen off of their site without them being able to really control the message. So it brings users back here. So that person who is theoretically doing that every single day, they're coming back to the site. If this is a site that makes its money from advertising, it means they're creating page views, and so that can be a positive thing. The other piece is that we balance the economy appropriately so that the act of sharing in and of itself cannot be the kind of thing that can by itself overwhelm the rest of the economy and make it so that you can create all these and get all these great rewards just from that act of sharing. Then the third piece, and this is a really critical piece, is that our rewards programs and our economies are, for the most part, non-dollar backed currencies. So what that means is that as a brand, I can reward millions upon millions of points, and there is not a variable cost associated with the rewards that I'm going to be granting. There's a fixed cost associated with those points. So I have rewards in my rewards program, like as a brand, I would have these things like a Twitter follow for my the main brand's Twitter handle, or maybe a sweepstakes entry. So there are going to be some hard costs and tangible items typically in a reward program, but then there's also these items that have soft costs and that can be redeemed many times, multiple times over and over again, and it doesn't cost the brand anything additional. So that non-dollar backed currency is a great way to be able to protect the brand and make sure that there is not additional incremental cost that's being rung up every single time somebody's going out there and taking this action.
So, okay, that's awesome. And of course, staying away from redemption is a hot topic for me too. I actually want to shift gears for a second. We have so little time together before we get to see you in April at G Summit. Um, so you made a kind of controversial decision in some corners about BigDoor's strategy, which is that you're not pursuing, it doesn't seem like the priority has been for you to pursue the enterprise market, which has been a sort of a big hot category using gamification for HR, and you've chosen to really focus and go deeper on the marketing and consumer facing loyalty side of the business.
Yeah.
What's the rationale for doing that? And what are you finding
So
is the plus and minus of going after it deeply this way?
So I think the enterprise market for gamification is fantastic. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. I think it'll be a big business, and I am really happy that it is that there's a number of good companies and good platforms that are pursuing that. We feel like partly because we're a startup and partly because we want to become experts in the very, very best, and we feel like we are the absolute best, and certainly the one the platform that's easiest to implement and that performs the best. We need to focus on implementations that have some amount of commonality between them. So consumer facing is critical, and we're going to stay there. That's what we're focused on. The other thing that allows us to do is it allows us to be able to test our theories and test our hypotheses across tens of millions of users. So we're not testing these across hundreds of employees or thousands of employees. We are testing these across literally tens of millions of consumers that we can see at literally every month, and we can get great feedback for our clients as well as for our learnings to be able to continue to propel our platform in the right way.
So what are some of the things that have like kind of been shocking or unusual or interesting about working with all those famous people? And you'll have to excuse that I sound a little bit of a fanboy, but you do have some kind of um, impressive brand and entertainment clients. So what about them is different, and what have been some of the kind of like interesting things that you've learned that are different?
So the big surprise to me personally has been the modesty and humility that these brands and even these individuals have. And so you take Chameleonaire and an incredibly modest, just great guy. You wouldn't think that. You'd think, he's going to be, he's got to have a huge ego, and you just don't get that at all. But in the same way, a lot of the big brands that we work with, you expect that the employees there, the senior members of the team who are making some of these critical decisions, you would expect them to be quite full of themselves. And what you find is that they are eager to learn. They're extremely intelligent and extremely talented, but at the same time, there have not been a lot of egos. And that's actually been a big shock to me, and not at all what I expected.
One of the things that I observe on the HR side, on the enterprise side of gamification a lot is that, people from the enterprise will come in and say, we really want to use gamification to transform work. How are we going to do it? Well, we're just going to force users to do it. Um, and this is a common kind of conflict with people in HR and human capital. Do you feel like there's on your side of the house? Do you ever run into this belief that big brands or famous people have, where It's just like, well, obviously I've always had a fan base, so they'll just do anything I want them to do, or do you have to actively convince them that they need to lean in on creating engagement with them?
It's interesting. I think there are certainly a lot of brands and a lot of companies who probably haven't realized that the lack of loyalty and lack of engagement is negatively impacting them, or that there's upside there that they could tap into quite easily. I think that will start to happen. If you started an airline today and decided not to have a rewards program as a part of your airline, you would not succeed. Just purely flat out, you would not succeed. And so, as we power more and more big brands and more companies that are creating very authentic, very on brand, gamified rewards programs to be able to thank and reward their customers and begin a dialogue and begin a relationship with those customers, I think the ones that are not if they don't realize it yet, they're going to realize it at some point in time that the lack of loyalty, the lack of engagement that they're having with their customers is going to significantly negatively impact their business because it's so positively impacting the business for the companies that do that well.
So listen, Keith, we're out of time, but I have one last question from your side that I thought was particularly interesting. So just give me your very, very quick read on this. What else is there other than money when we're talking about users that we actually can track in terms of their connection to the brand? You've talked about a lot of things, say authenticity, engagement. What else do we need to be tracking other than things that boil down to money? Is there something else?
Money is great because it's a people it's difficult to get people to separate from their dollars, and so if as a brand or as a company you can do that consistently over a long period of time, it's a great indicator that you're doing something right. But beyond that, I think there are a ton of lead indicators, and those are the things that we look at and we pay attention to. And so, as an example, if customers are willing to and eager to give their personal information or to sign up with the site, that's a great lead indicator that they actually care about this brand. If they're engaging with the brand, that they're sharing the brand with their friends, that is a fantastic indication that they have a deep loyalty and connection to that brand. And of course, if they're coming back and if they're just interacting on a regular basis, that's a huge indication as well.
And of course, in extreme cases, if you haven't seen it, watch the Chameleonaire talk from last year's G Summit. We could be measuring tattoos by fans as well. And
Absolutely,
so,
yes.
on that note, thanks so much. We've been talking with Keith Smith, CEO and founder of BigDoor. You can follow Keith at Chief Doorman on Twitter or BigDoor itself at BigDoor. I'm Gabe Zickerman. Remember that Gamification Summit's coming up in April 16th through the 18th of 2013. Be held in San Francisco. That's a G Summit. Thanks for joining us today for the Gamification Revolution. I'm Gabe Zickerman. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep having fun.
Thanks, Gabe.